Thanks for joining me today for episode 139 of Think Big with Michael Zellner podcast, powered by Platinum Jewelers. Joining me today as my guest is Michael Grozier. Michael is from Newtown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is a small suburb of Philadelphia. He is the founder and CEO of Trueline Brands, and he's going to tell us what that is today and all the exciting things they have going on during the podcast. He was the co-creator of House of Blues along with Isaac Tigert. Listen to this. Michael was the executive vice president of clubs and theaters division for Live Nation and was in charge of over 80 locations nationwide. And he is the one that started a premium VIP membership club foundation room in each location that doubled their revenue from 14 million to 28 million in store sales in just 3 years. Pretty friggin' amazing. So obviously this guy thinks big. We can talk about that today too, because it is awesome. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Michael. And it's nice to be going Michael to Michael. I enjoy that very much. I think,
yes, absolutely.
And Michael, no way we screw this up.
Exactly. And Michael in Hebrew means of like a God. I didn't know if you knew that or not.
I did not know that, but I am appreciative of that now.
Yes, me too. As I mentioned, you're from the Philly area and you went to Bernard's High School in New Jersey. For those that don't know, that's, that whole area is so close together. What are a few of the memories from your younger and your high school years that still make you smile today when you think about them?
That's a great question. I think certainly, some of the friends that I made, there are moments in some of the sporting events that I remember, a great block, or, I hit a grand slam against our arch rivals in baseball. So, I had some fun moments, and it was a great place to grow up. I grew up mostly in Bucks County, but then my father changed jobs and ended up graduating high school in Bernardsville, and then on to Villanova. And my Villanova friends are probably still my best friends over the course of my life.
Yeah, I have my bad memory of Villanova is the '85 Final Four when Memphis State Villanova played. And then obviously Villanova went on to win the championship. But yeah, I was I believe a junior in high school during that game. But I remember Raleigh Massimino. What a great coach. He outcoached Dana Kirk during that game and slowed the game down because he knew that was the only way to beat the team, because Memphis was loaded that year.
Yeah.
And what a great coach, but not a good memory from Villanova. But I ended up becoming a Jay Wright fan later on. So I thought he was an awesome coach.
Yeah, I played Little League Baseball with Jay Wright. That's how far.
Very cool.
Yeah, he also is from Bucks County. So, it's very exciting times coming out of Bucks County then.
Yeah, very absolutely. When you speak of Villanova, you studied communications there, graduated in '81. What led you to your decision to go there, and why communications?
Well, it's an interesting story. I didn't really know where to go to school. My father went to Notre Dame. My mother went to Villanova. And Villanova was kind enough to accept me. So that was where I went.
Right.
And, I originally went with the idea I was going to get into business, not even knowing what that meant. And my father was a doctor, so I switched to pre-med, took a vicious beating in organic chemistry, and decided communication might be more up my alley. So, I got my degree in communication. Part of that was to take some theater classes within the liberal arts degree. And I'd always been the goofy jock in high school that, if the English teacher needed somebody for a fight scene in Guys and Dolls, I would do it. So, so that led to going to New York, trying to be an actor. I was up for Woody on Cheers and a couple of things that I didn't get. Right. And I had a girlfriend that pointed me in the direction of Hard Rock at the time, Isaac Tigert's, who co-founded, obviously, the Hard Rock with Peter Morton in London. And it just opened in New York City probably about 6 months earlier. And I got a job there. And that was the beginning of my career.
What was the experience of trying to act in New York like for you?
I think the most jarring part of it, it's not the failure or the lack of uh, getting jobs was not as shocking to me as like walking into a room and seeing 22 other people that sort of kind of look like you.
Right.
Like you start to realize, oh my gosh, I am a type, and there's a lot of other me's out there. And so that to me was like something I'll never forget, is walking into a room and looking around going, I feel like I'm in a parallel universe, or I've been cloned or something. It was just a very interesting experience.
Now, I have a friend who's an actor. We had mentioned off air before here. He's in Palm Springs now, taking care of his elderly mom. But he now obviously a lot of the auditions are done, over the phone, and they send in. It's so different now. Sometimes they don't go into a room, but he's done both. And he's told me the same thing. He got sort of cast type as a bad guy, and he's done a lot of different ones. Like I was just watching TV the other day, and his episode of NCIS New Orleans came up, and the fight scene with Scott Bakula. But yeah, he walked into. He's told me that story before. The same thing. You walk into a room, and he goes, "You got all these guys," and he goes, "We all sort of know each other because we would all, cast type as the same type of, character."
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Pretty
Tough
crazy.
business.
Yeah, very tough. And I think the percentage that actually make a living, I saw during the SAG strikes, it was only like 11%
Oh,
of the
wow.
actors actually are making living as actors.
Yeah.
Everybody else is below the below the poverty line in terms of what they're making.
Yeah,
Which
most people don't realize that. Most people see, people continuously, maybe a character actor and thing, and they're making a ton of money. And a lot of times that's just not the case.
right, right.
So you mentioned Hard Rock Cafe in New York. You started off there as a floater. What did a
Host,
floater do at
yeah.
the club?
Well, at the time I was a host. I was sort of the bridge between the lines outside, because in those days uh, we ended up managing three particular lines. We'd go the whole length of 57th Street with people who just wanted to get in and eat in the restaurant, and then we had a line of people who had checked in, but were underage, so we weren't going to put them in the bar and take up bar space. And then there were other
Sure.
people that just wanted to buy merchandise, and so we had to manage that too, because the lobby was not that big, and we for all the people who just wanted it. Isaac really wanted the merchandise to be something that people had to earn a little bit, whether it was waiting in line to get into the restaurant, or it couldn't be something that was just a easy to get, because if it was easy to get, it would have less value.
Right.
So, for years, I think, again, the great vision and discipline of Isaac Tigert, uh, particularly in this area, making merchandise difficult made it matter. And could he have done a lot more business in any particular years? Yes. But would the brand have been as strong as it turned out to be? Because it did occupy the second most recognizable brand in the world for decades, behind Coca-Cola.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and so I don't know that the brand would have been as powerful as it turned out to be without his wisdom, I think, to make the actual T-shirt tough to get.
Right. His parents, John and Pat Tigert, very, very well-known philanthropists, here in Memphis. And I believe John passed away a few years ago, but Pat's still going strong. And, Isaac, started, obviously, as you said, the Hard Rock up in New York, and he liked you a lot. And you were, I believe, a protege of his. And I know you ended up becoming a manager at the Hard Rock up there. Tell us a little bit about him and how your relationship developed over the years you worked together.
Well, he's definitely continues to be my hero and sort of my North Star in my career. When I started, I was a host. I remember making the big jump from $8 an hour to $10 an hour, and I thought, man, I am living the dream. And and working there, and Isaac is I think he's about 12 years older than I am. So there's always on one hand, there was a time where it was a little bit like a father figure, and then he became an older brother, and over the years now I consider him, a friend. And so that's been an interesting and fun journey. I've watched Isaac just create some of the most amazing things and have a vision for what things are supposed to look like that is second to none. I've learned a lot about salesmanship. I learned in my time with Isaac too that I was a creative person. I didn't realize I was a creative person. I thought growing up that creative people were artists who could, make an apple look like an apple, and make a scenescape look like the scene. And with the opening of House of Blues and the importance of outsider art and folk art, I really started to appreciate that creativity comes in a lot of different ways and a lot of different forms, and we're all creative people. We just don't think in those terms. We don't talk in those terms. But I think in my next venture, creativity is going to be something that's really important to me, both for the artists. I want artists to be artists, and I want the staff to understand that they are creative people too, and that every day when you get up and you put your clothes on, that's the beginning of your creative approach to life, right? Like how you look when you walk out the door is a choice,
Yep, absolutely.
and what you choose to wear is a choice, and that requires some level of creativity and forethought, and that's the beginning of your canvas for that day. And so I think that I think learning that lesson from the House of Blues, the early House of Blues days, was very powerful for me. And then the combination of House of Blues and hard rock, really the idea that Isaac never believed in marketing, but he did believe in PR, and I think, and I started to appreciate that, he or I could tell you something was great, but it's even more valuable if somebody else outside of the two of us confirms that this is great, and I think PR is one of those interesting vehicles that is like a third person in some unique way. It offers some type of credibility, but that credibility then backs up your thinking or what you're offering. And I think that's where, in some ways, that's where some of the magic is, and that's where some of the greatness of Isaac lives, in that idea that one, if you don't have a story, you have nothing going on, right? Two, culture is something that is driven by stories to a large degree, and how they get repeated and what people talk about and how they talk about you. And then I think something else that's always really important to me, and it's just this idea that you are, in some ways, who you associate with is also how you get defined. So in the early days of House of Blues, as an example, we sponsored the blues tent at Jazz Fest. And so we had, the House of Blues up over our stage, and it was a really big deal. But what made it even bigger was the fact that on the other stages, it was Miller and Ray-Ban and Sun's, some latest technology company. So all of a sudden, this little restaurant and live entertainment chain is living next to some really massive brands. And so on a certain level, that just brings people's perception of us up. If we're part of that crew, then we must be bigger than they think.
Yeah, gives you a lot of credibility.
Yes, exactly.
You've lived in many places throughout the United States, including obviously Philly, New York, New Orleans, Dallas, Boston, San Diego, and more. But I have to ask you, I read at some point in your life, you ended up living in a city called, and I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this right, Ankeny, Iowa. How did you end up living there?
Yes, that was, my late wife, her parents were from, or were living there in Ankeny, Iowa, and we were in New Orleans, and Hurricane Katrina hit, and so we ended up after the hurricane sort of evacuating there. So my kids, end up graduating high school there. I continued to work for House of Blues, but I called Ankeny, Iowa, the home office for the foundation rooms at the time, because that's where I was. And, and I worked out of there for about 2 years until Live Nation came along and bought us up. And then I started working for Live Nation.
Very neat. Interesting story. I figured that probably it would be some type of family that was involved with it, but I had to definitely ask you about that.
Yes, yes.
This this is something that was said about you. Quote, Michael is an American original, a happy, hardworking, fun guy who has worked with many of the biggest and most groundbreaking bands and artists in the music industry to bring unforgettable performance experience to fans in cities across the United States. Michael not only brings a reputation for excellence, but is full of insights into the ingredients of success, unquote. That's pretty awesome, Michael. If you would, share with the audience some of your most memorable and favorite experiences you had over the years with some of the big time people or artists that we may know, and, maybe a funny story that you might be able to share too.
Well, first, I can't believe you were able to get David Geffen to talk to you about my career. Just kidding.
I
Uh,
understand.
no, that's a very sweet description. I think some of the shows that really stand out for me. One actually was a Dolly Parton show, and Dolly was just she actually says it in her biography. There's a thing on either Netflix or HBO or something, but it's about Dolly and her career, and so she felt like she'd gotten away from music and also kind of wanted to come back, but wanted to come back playing small clubs and things like that. So the House of Blues, so we got a bunch of Dolly Parton shows, and the Dolly audience, aside from the fact that she is just as gracious and sweet backstage as she seems on stage, her audience was just so amazingly diverse. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, and this is probably 20 years ago,
Sure.
and maybe even more. And her audience ranged from drag queens to people who are sort of classic country fans to people who were kind of in the mainstream and living a normal life. And it was gay, it was straight, it was affluent, it was below the poverty line. It just seemed to check every demographic, and I just thought that was so amazing. And on top of that, then her show and the love back and forth between Dolly and her audience. I mean, you can feel it. It's
Right.
like a tangible thing that's in the air that fills the space. So that's always really memorable for me. And then we had the first Elton John show after Lady Di or Princess Di and Versace had both died in a very short period of time, both great friends of his. And so he did this storytellers thing with VH1 or MTV. I think it was MTV. Anyway, so we had them roll in and we had him perform, and it was just a really, really special night. And then another one was the LA opening. When we opened in Los Angeles, it was right after Magic Johnson had gone public about having HIV,
Right.
and so James Brown it was the most incredible night of music. James Brown, it was Dan Aykroyd's party with Magic, and so the room was just filled with a Hollywood who's who, like Jack Nicholson, Kurt and Goldie, Springsteen, Pierce Brosnan, the whole Saturday Night Live crowd, but decades of Saturday Night Live performers. Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, the list went on and on. There's probably 200 just like A-list celebrities in the room. Michael Eisner, Michael Ovitz, everybody was important in Hollywood.
Right.
And it ended that night with James Brown, the late great James Brown, on stage, and he starts calling people up. Wesley Snipes, get on up here. Dan Aykroyd, get on up here. Magic Johnson, get on up here. And Bruce Springsteen, get on up here. And he ends up on stage with like 30 people, and they're doing "I'm a Sex Machine," and everybody's taking a chorus, or taking a verse. And it was just one of those nights where you knew you were in the middle of something special, never
Right.
again to be duplicated, never again to be seen. And you're just lucky enough to be have your fingerprints a little bit on the event itself, but the event was way bigger than, way bigger than us, way bigger.
It's hard to believe that's been 30 years because I believe it was 92 when Magic announced that he had, come down with HIV. So, to know that how, when we're younger, time goes by so slow. And we're
Mm-hmm.
told when you get older, time zooms by. And whoever said that, which is probably bunches of people, they didn't lie to us because time now goes by like so quick.
Yes. It's kind of frightening, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is. It is very frightening. Absolutely. Isaac, I believe he built the Hard Rock in Dallas, and you and your family moved there, and you were the GM. And I think it opened in '86, if I remember correctly. And I was told this place was like a palace and just beautiful inside and out. Tell us about the green room you developed there and a little bit about the place and what it was like for you to have the opportunity at such a young age. I believe that you were in your mid to late 20s.
Yeah. So let's see. So it opened in, I think it was 86. Uh, yeah, it was, Isaac called it then the Supreme Court of rock and roll. It had these, great majestic columns, kind of look like, something out of Greece. I mean, the country, and inside there were three sort of large mirrors, or not mirrors, but large windows where Isaac had artists commissioned to do Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry, and Elvis. The judges of the Supreme Court. And so the stained glass work was just extraordinary. I mean, the Elvis on the throne, TCB,
Right.
a lot of big hits. Gold lame suit sitting in the throne. And then Jerry Lee Lewis obviously is on the keyboards, but it's great balls of fire, and there's fire flying everywhere around him. And then Chuck Berry, Hail Hail Rock and Roll, and Johnny B. Good. And anyway, it was a very striking building. And so there's a pumping oil dike out front. Anytime the oil was pumping, we were open. And we started doing fajitas and nachos and things like that down there in Texas, which wasn't part of the New York experience, but
Right.
it was amazing. And then Isaac, this was the first foray into VIP clubs. He did the Cheese Club there, where he had taken a lot of things that he found in England when they were renovating, older castles, older buildings, and created this really kind of over the top. You can call it the Cheese Club, with a separate menu, separate entrance, VIP entrance, and he wanted people who probably wouldn't go to the Hard Rock, but would go for an elevated experience. And that turned out to be a really big win for the Dallas project, and certainly an eye opener for us. And that became the precursor to doing the foundation rooms with House of Blues.
Right.
Are you shopping for a new watch, an engagement ring, any kind of jewelry at all? What's up, Memphis? This is Jaren Jackson Jr. from the Grizzlies, encouraging you all to shop where I shop, Platinum Jewelers here in Memphis. Platinum Jewelers has a big selection of earrings, stockable rings, luxury watches, necklaces, bracelets, really whatever you need. 9387 Poplar next to Fresh Market in Germantown. So if you need anything jewelry related, go to my spot, Platinum Jewelers.
You ran and operated a series of venues and chain of nightclubs in New Jersey after Isaac sold his stake in the Hard Rock cafes. And then a few years later, he was creating the House of Blues, which you've talked about. And he called you and he wanted you to come back and work with him. Obviously, he trusted you. You guys had a strong bond together, and he made you GM of the first, I would say, real, House of Blues that opened up, not the one in Jackson, Tennessee, that held about 10 to 15 people, but the real one that opened up in the Boston area back in 92.
Yes.
You guys had such success there that 2 years later, a second location opens up in New Orleans. You're on the move again. Startup, you were the GM in charge of hiring. You ended up living in New Orleans for a long time. So you must have, I guess you liked it there until,
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess, Katrina. Tell us about, a little bit more about House of Blues and how the expansion, because it continued to go.
Yeah, I think, so Isaac, put everything that he had, everything that he made from Hard Rock. It's an incredible story. I mean, I think I will never forget that the day he sold his half of Hard Rock, and he sold it for $107 million,
Wow.
as I recall. And this is in 1988, I think, give or take. Motown sold that same day for $67 million. And then there was a building in Dallas that sold for $127 million. So it was really fascinating to me. Just sort of real estate was still more valuable than this half of the Hard Rock brand. And it was still way more valuable than all of the Motown catalog.
Right.
I don't know that would be the case today. I think the Motown catalog will probably be, worth twice what the building was worth.
Right.
But anyway, that was the nature of it. And out of that 107 million, he 36 million came to him, and he spent $10 million to build a free hospital in the poorest section of India, doing open heart surgeries for people who couldn't afford it. He put another 8, I think, into 8 or 10 into ARC, which was a Chrissy Hind, early vegan sort of, let's change the planet, let's change our products, let's change, kind of how we consume. And then he took, he married Maureen Starkey, Ringo's first wife.
Right.
And they had a great wedding in Monte Carlo. And I think he spent $3 or $4 million and took, 80 people down the Nile, and into the pyramids and that sort of thing. And anyway, long story short, I think his last 6 or 7 million he put into starting House of Blues. And so our first one was in Harvard Square. He had already signed a lease in New Orleans and signed a lease in LA. And off of this little house, which was only 28 feet wide, we raised $36 million to do New Orleans, finish Boston, and do LA. And then we did have a lease in Chicago at the time, which we didn't. We ultimately went somewhere else. But that was the beginning. And like most things, it was fraught with peril. There were times where it looked like there was no hope left, and this was going to be an epic fail, and yet never happened. Whoever needed to save the day, who was ever on the other side of the world, somehow magically showed up and saved the day, and that just went on for years and years. It was really an incredible ride, and something that I just don't know how it could ever be duplicated again.
Right. The House of Blues was also involved in the '96 Summer Olympics in Atlanta. You guys had a huge presence there. I heard it was the place to hang out. Many celebrities, spent a lot of time there, and that you were in charge. You were the guy. Share with us about that time and that huge old church that you guys took over for about 6 weeks.
Yeah, the Tabernacle, which now was part of the portfolio that I managed at Live Nation. So that was kind of a sweet comeback. But we did the temporary House of Blues for the Olympics. It was right by Centennial Park. We were prepared to go public. We had, we were very successful in New Orleans, very successful in LA. We were making money in Boston still in that tiny little house. And we were under construction in Myrtle Beach, under construction in Chicago. So the plan was to go public, and so we rushed down there. We turned this old church into a House of Blues. We operated. We did about $36 million in revenue in about a little over 2 weeks. We survived the bombing in Centennial Park. But two things happened. The stock market crashed right around that time. So this plan to go public, using the publicity of the Olympics, didn't happen. And then we had a shortfall, although Media Age called it the second best marketing campaign behind the McDonald's Arch Deluxe, which launched at that point. And they spent, I don't know, $70 million to launch that new burger. And we were the second best campaign, and even with $36 million in revenue, we lost about $30 million. Wow. So it was like a double or triple whammy at the time, because we've got cost overruns in Chicago. We just lost $30 million at the Olympics, and we're not going public. So it was a real tough scramble, but again, it looked like at a couple different instances, no hope. And then boom, everything's solved, and we're back on track. And we opened Myrtle Beach, we opened Orlando, we opened Chicago, and it was an amazing time. It was a real roller coaster ride through a corkscrew, ups and downs, but it was pretty amazing. And now it's all part of like this great folklore and history, right, of that particular time, at least for me and the people who are part of it.
How did you handle this? That had to be stressful with all that going on, especially what you just explained about, you think you're going public, stock options and all that, and losing that money and all that. And how were you able to handle stress, failures and things like that, and bounce back?
Well, I think I was lucky in that my job, was sort of running the businesses. Like I was running New Orleans then, and New Orleans was a 7-day, 7-night business. So, Isaac and a few other people were kind of dealing with the bigger macro issues, and I got to escape into day-to-day business. At the end of the day, control what you can control. And so my responsibilities were the business, and trying to run great restaurants and great VIP rooms, great music halls. And so, for me, it was just nose down and keep going, and hope that everything else works out. Let the people who are supposed to do what they do what they do. And I didn't want anything to blow back and say, hey, this is, we don't have a great product. We had a great product. We're always trying to make it better. And so for me, it was nose down and keep trying to deliver on that promise.
How did Isaac handle when things like that happen? I mean, failure, obviously everybody who's ever been successful has failed at some point in time. You're going to fail probably many times. How did he handle things like that happen? And, what was his mindset like?
Well, he is a devotee of Satya Sai Baba. So he had an extraordinary faith that everything that was happening was all part of what Sai Baba had created or dreamed up or manifested. So Sai Baba would tell him things will be fine, and this will happen, and then that will happen. And generally speaking, it seemed to be everything that Isaac told me that he had told him seemed to happen. So I think Isaac's faith, which is really extraordinary. I'm not here to speak pro or con on, Satya Sai Baba, but all I know is that there was always a lot of magic around what happened at Hard Rock and House of Blues. And Isaac believed through his DNA, or down to his DNA, that this was all Sai Baba's vision for what was going to happen and what he wanted to happen. So it's fascinating because I grew up Irish Catholic kid, and so my relationship with religion and faith was certainly he certainly opened my eyes on a lot of different things. That there are many ways to serve, many ways to be a good person. Not many ways to be a good person, but there's many ways to serve, and there are a lot of paths to the light. I think I believe that. I believe that.
You co-created the Foundation Room at the House of Blues. It was a private club inside the club. Yes. What happened there, and what did people, who were members expect inside in the Foundation Room to happen?
Well, it was really when we started, the foundation room was sort of the fourth leg on a three-legged stool. It was this thing. It was the next iteration of the Cheese Club, which Isaac had, started in Dallas. But if you were general manager, and we had a GM in LA, we had a GM in Chicago, it was sort of like the general managers. It was, in terms of importance, it was after the restaurant, right? You go talent. We needed shows. Special events was a big part of our economic model. The restaurants were also a big driver. So the foundation room kind of fell fourth. So, GMs cared about it, but there was no real direction. And when we opened in New Orleans, there was never any intent to do a foundation room there. We thought it was going to be big cities, New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago, Vegas. Maybe that's it.
Right.
So being in New Orleans and then having been through two Mardi Gras where people were spending anywhere from tens of thousands of people were spending anything from like $3,000 to $15,000 for just an 8-hour ride on a float in costume, throwing plastic beads to people. Once I saw that, I was like, wait a second. If there's 30,000 people like this that are doing this, I think I can get 1,000 people to join the foundation room. So then I started lobbying the company to give me the money to build one out. And it took a little while. And I think one of my couple of great lessons I got out of that process, though, was one of them was I had a boss at the time, who managed the purse strings, and I was lobbying to get the money to build this, and so I would build pro formas, and every time I built a pro forma, somebody would say, we need more. It needs to be better. It needs this. Well, you told me that was the threshold you needed. And I showed you that, well, yeah, but it needs more. So it's kind of like this game of continuing to move the goalposts, to get this project going. And anyway, I had a colleague who at one point I was getting very exasperated for that very reason. And he said, just change the numbers. I was like, just change the numbers. What does that mean? And he's like, just give them the numbers they want. You'll make it work once you get it built, but you got to get it built. So tell them what they want to hear. And it was like, I don't know if that's exactly right, but I'll tweak the numbers and at least get it to where they want, and still believe in the numbers that I'm presenting. Like I couldn't make that up, right? So anyway, longer story short, this idea that just keep evolving. No is not terminal. No is not the end. No just means you haven't told the right way to tell the story yet. So that was a big lesson. And then later, kind of to follow that suit, when I got to Live Nation, and the first go around, I had over 80 clubs that I was responsible for, but within 28 regions. So it was an influence job. It wasn't a P&L job, because there were presidents for all these markets that had these clubs, and so you had to kind of work through the presidents. And anyway, when I first started at Live Nation, there's a lot to do about forecasting. How are you going to perform? And then how do we challenge you to say you're going to do better? And then how do we get you to do better beyond the forecast? So there was a little bit of, I had a colleague who understood this game quicker than I did. And we would do these, what we called risky show calls, where we go into every one of these regions and we go through every show that they had booked. And we'd say, you're saying it's going to cost $20,000 for production for the show, but we just did this show in 7 other markets and it cost $12,000. So you need to take your forecast down, at least take it down to $14,000, right? Still $2,000 higher than what everybody else was spending, but just to be safe, let's at least true it up. Well, it turned out then my colleague was getting this crazy praise from the CEO at the time, saying, look at that, Tony just saved over $8 million in production across the company. And for me at first, it was like, saved $8 million? He didn't save anything. He just trued up some bad numbers.
Right.
As far as the company was concerned at that point, that was real savings. And then, so that $8 million plus whatever, little snibs were saved after the show played off. That was how success was gauged. Getting the number down and then delivering a better number than what you got it down to. So it took me a little while to understand that's the game. That's what it is, and then as we got tighter and tighter, we learned more and more about either how people were protecting their forecasts, making them easy to hit, easy to beat. But that led us to all kinds of insights then on how we could actually do things better. It isn't just about now truing up forecasts. It's like, how do we run it even better than what they're thinking they can run it for? So it's been a fascinating ride because I've had the privilege of being a revenue guy and the challenge of being the cost guy. And so I think both have served me well in terms of developing my own approach and philosophy to leadership and management.
You now live in Los Angeles, have been out in the area in Beverly Hills, for a while. You have two daughters, Margot and Gina. Tell us a little bit about them and what your children have brought to your life.
Oh, well, my oldest, Gina, is 33 now, and she's got a 2.5-year-old daughter. So I'm a grandpa, so that's fascinating. I think just, Gina is both Gina and Margot grew up in the House of Blues. So they understand my torment and pleasure in good service and good product. As well as they know when things are running. They already know when a place runs well or doesn't. They've been around it enough. But Gina's awesome. She works for Nationwide Insurance. She's been working her way up there and doing great. Margot runs food and beverage for a festival company out here in Los Angeles. So she'll walk in and set up shop for a weekend performance. They'll work 2 weeks for a couple $1 million in revenue, and then lock it up, put it away, and go on to the next site. So my kids are great. I'm thrilled with the people that they are. Most importantly, they have good sense of humor. They're good friends. They're good sisters. They get along great. They're the best friends as sisters, and I think that just that makes me really happy. And being able to hang out with my kids now at this age and laugh and tell stories and reminisce while also talking about, their careers and where they're going and, what they're happy about. And now my oldest being a parent also, it's so funny. She reflects differently on her childhood now, now that she knows how hard it is to be a parent, I'm very fortunate that we have great kids. I'm married now. I have a great wife. She has 2 sons as well. Her oldest son is working with me on my Greenville project. So, my family environment is fantastic.
That's wonderful. Now that we've talked about your really exciting past, let's pivot and talk about the present and the future.
Sure.
You're going to be in Memphis, this coming up Wednesday, October 11th, at Bar DKDC at noon for an exciting presentation, during lunch to talk about Trueline Brands for a group of people. Tell us how all this got started, what some of your goals are and what you're doing with this new venture and what Trueline Brands is all about, please.
Sure. I am thinking big, Michael. That's the goal here. So while I was the EVP for the last 15 years at Live Nation, I had opened the Charlotte Fillmore, opened the Underground in Charlotte, had been involved in the Tabernacle, which was under my purview at Live Nation since the 90s, mid 90s, and opened the Buckhead Theater and the Roxy Theater, or the Roxy, excuse me, at SunTrust Park with the Braves. And, Greenville lives between Charlotte and Atlanta. And so one of my colleagues pointed out that Greenville might be an interesting new market for us. And so I went and checked it out and fell in love with the market. Just recently, again, it was named the 4th best small city in America. I'll find you the publication, but it's widely regarded just about everywhere as great place to visit, great place to live, great place to work. It's a city that in the 70s was a big textile town that obviously went belly up like most of the textile towns in this country did. And instead of sort of folding and floundering, Max Heller, who was the original mayor, and then Knox White, who's been the mayor now for some amount of years, have done a great job of managing growth. They made some bold moves. They took up the railroad tracks, which were on both sides of the river that ran right through the center of downtown, and turned it into walking or riding trails going 30 miles left to right on both sides. So you literally can, ride a bike or hike or walk to Asheville from Greenville, Asheville, North Carolina. Very scenic. It's now also a really top cycling town. A couple of Lance Armstrong's old guys set up shop there, and now, anybody that's a serious rider, comes through Greenville. But anyway, so I come to town and I fall in love with the town, and then I learned that there's an entertainment district in town, as well as in the city charter. They've been looking for the last 25 years for some type of live entertainment, more upscale live entertainment. So I go into the West End. Now I'm aware that there's no competition, and this is something the city wants. And then I find this building in the West End that is just perfect for the format that we've evolved into. The format provides us the opportunity to do a two-story 1,700 cap club, 1,500 GA on the ground floor, with about 250 people to 300 people on the balcony, 127 fixed theater seats in the center, and then 2 rows of 50 bar stools on both sides. We're exploring whether we can get a few more seats in there now, but a 1,700 capacity big room. And then behind the balcony is a small room for about 400 people with a VIP club. And then there's a great outdoor space for just sort of outdoor drinking, hanging, eating, watching sporting events or movies or whatever, that we're going to program for outside. So we have a model that, we think is going to be pretty successful. In my career, I built a bunch of venues up to $4 million EBITDA businesses that don't have near the what I like to call the weaponry that we have available to us here in Greenville. So I think, the other thing that was so important in this process was I started to count up how many unique acts that were playing for us between 1,100 at the Underground in Charlotte and 3,500 at the Roxy in Atlanta. It was like 600 acts, unique acts.
Wow.
Driving down 85 right past Greenville, just waving as they went because they didn't have any place to play. So all these factors went into getting me very excited about Greenville. So I pursued a lease. I brought it to Live Nation at the time, and they felt like they had too many mouths to feed in the Carolinas. So I asked if I could pursue it on my own, and they said yes. So I chose to pursue it on my own. And so now I'm raising money. I'm working with Vicinity Capital on a local raise. Vicinity is an organization that basically is able to do SEC approved crowdfunding. So we've already raised. We're on our way to $4 million right now. I think we're somewhere in the 3.2, 3.3.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to raise 10, and Vicinity allows somebody to come in for as little as $1,000 and be an investor, in a business. So I love that. I think from a live music standpoint,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that you have to be an asset to the community. If you're not an asset to the community, you're a liability. And how do you be an asset to the community? Well, you support the community, and the community supports you. And so, this idea that people who want to be part of this can be part of it. And I also know from my own personal experience that there are many junctures in my career where I could have afforded $1,000 to invest in something, but I didn't see myself as an investor. I how does $1,000 matter or move the needle? Well, in this particular case, it really does matter, and it does move the needle. That being said, we've got a lot of people already we've got some couple of $1 million investors, a lot of 50s, 100s, 250, 300s. But to me, it's as valuable to have these folks who are going to be users, who believe in, the importance of live music in the community, and now they can own a piece of it. They can call themselves an investor. And I just think I think that's great. It really democratizes investment, and it gets more people in the game, which I think is also very good.
Sounds wonderful. Yeah, live music has always been a big deal for me. I'll tell you about that in just a second. My last question for you. What are the most important lessons that you've learned in your life?
In no particular order, I would say I had a great conversation with Michael Rapino one time, the CEO and the leader of Live Nation, and he told me, if you can't count it, it doesn't matter. I just thought that was really fascinating to me, because it's like, okay, well, what if I'm not counting something now? We'll figure out how to count it if you think it's important. So it wasn't, he didn't want to hear, hey, we're doing great, we're doing better. Better than what? Better than last year? Better than budget? Better than our peers? What are we doing better than? So measuring things and counting things, became really important to my leadership and my own personal sort of approach to management, because it is a yardstick. You can't just have these sort of backhanded, I'm doing better. Okay, let's talk about what better is.
Right.
Could be service scores. You want to talk about people's experience in your building and their experience with your product. That's a number. That's a score. So it must matter, because we can count it, right?
Right.
So that was one thing. I think then from over time we developed this 10-5 first and last, and so as people, I learned early that a smile and a kind word goes a long way to making people feel comfortable and at home. So our mission was always to have the first word, to make the first acknowledgement, of someone, and then in a perfect world have the last word. So maybe, you're walking up and I'm at the door. Hey, think big. That's a pretty cool. Where did you get that? Oh, thank you. We have a little conversation, and then you continue on to the show, and I say, hey, enjoy the show. That would be, in my world, that would be a great little interaction. We took a moment to make it matter. That was a big thing with Isaac, making moments matter. So how do we take what for some is a nothing moment and make it matter? I think that was always very important. And then I think coming up through the restaurants too, with Hard Rock and having a restaurant at House of Blues, this idea that you had to make Tuesday lunch as valuable as Saturday night business. Even though the dollars weren't the same, even though the staff wasn't the same size, if you weren't trying to be great on a Tuesday lunch, you weren't going to be great on a Saturday night. You're either great or you're not.
Yep.
So for me, that became a really important. And then you kind of distill that down even further, and it's just be present, be real right now, right? Saturday's coming, but it's not here yet. Even though, as we talked, it'll be here faster than we want it to be.
Yeah.
It's not here. The only thing that matters is right now, right here. So I think that's always been important. I think in my early days, when I first got started, I worked on the Jersey Shore. Old college roommate of mine, his father owned a bunch of bars and clubs in Avalon, New Jersey, and he was a character, Big Phil. Phil's bongo room, Phil's rock room. Everything was Phil's something, and but he knew who worked for him, and he knew just enough that he could sort of poke him. Whether it was, oh yeah, I saw you with that honey 2 nights ago. Whatever happened there? Or I can't believe you're standing and you haven't picked up those bottles by your feet, Tommy. Get it together. What's a good looking guy like you standing in all this trash? But he just knew enough that he could poke and tease. but it really was his way of showing that he cared, he knew about you, and those moments matter. So if you ran into him, you had a big Phil experience, and he didn't let those moments go by without acknowledging people who work for him, and I thought that was really great. And then Isaac, the list is endless, but I think a couple of things we mentioned PR earlier, as it related to Isaac, this idea that I can tell you I'm great, but if my pal Michael Zellner tells you I'm great, then you're more likely to think I'm great, not because I said it, but because Michael Zellner then sort of either corroborated or said it unasked for,
Right.
So that has more valuable. And then creativity, I'll never forget when Isaac first brought me in to see all the folk art. He goes, "Kid, what do you think? You're going to be the guy that has to explain this to everybody." And I was like, "Geez, Isaac, I mean, it's kind of primitive. It's kind of simple. Looks like, my kids could do a lot of this stuff." And he goes, "Kid, that's the brilliance. These people create for the sheer joy of creating. They're not even doing this to make money. They're doing this because it's a calling, because it's a mission. It's something that they feel strongly about." And that was sort of the beginning of realizing that art and creativity it's not the old world masters, painting lifelike scenes. It's also concepts and colors, and just because it's folk art doesn't mean it's great. Just because it's painted by a master doesn't mean you're going to like it. It's sort of, everything is somewhere in between. And then the other great lesson too for me always was unity and diversity. When we first started, I totally understood sort of the surface level of unity and diversity, right? Sexual orientation, sexual, kind of your gender, various religions, ages, all that. But over time, I got enlightened by a few people that it wasn't just those things too. It's creative people with people who are more structured and more want to process than they want to be, out of the box, and people who can handle pain and people who can't handle pain, and people who are positive and people who aren't positive, and people who are introverts and people who are extroverts. Like these are all part of the spectrum, a 365-degree spectrum on what makes us different, what makes us special. So to me, unity and diversity then took on an even deeper and more significant meaning, because it wasn't just some of the stuff we talk about now. It's far greater than all that. And so finding a way to weave all that together in a business, in a culture, I just thought was extraordinary. And so I'm hoping to do, that again with Trueline and Trueline Brands.
Awesome things there. Thank you very much for sharing all that. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsor for Think Big with Michael Zellner podcast, Platinum Jewelers. They're located at 9387 Poplar Avenue in Germantown, right as you go east through the light at Johnson Road on the right-hand side. Preston Hudson and his staff will take great care of you there, so definitely go and check them out. Michael, this sounds like a really exciting opportunity for anyone locally here in Memphis area that's interested in coming Wednesday, and if they can't make it but want to know more. What's the best way for them to contact you?
My email is Michael at Trueline Brands. So TrulineBrands, TruelineBrands.com. And then if they're interested in joining us next Wednesday in Memphis, I think Craig Weiner is taking some RSVPs for people who might have an interest in investing. I think Craig, do you have his email? I think it's furnt@aol.com.
That is correct. Furnt, FURNT@AOL.com.
Yeah. So if someone's interested, if they want to send a little note to Craig, he'll coordinate and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Really enjoyed talking to you today and hearing about your past with music. On a much, much smaller scale, I had a about a 200 to 300, depending on how many, tables we had to move out, live music bar here in Memphis in the late 90s called The Library. And we had a
Oh,
lot of great local bands that played as well as some national bands, Edwin McCain played here, so it was pretty cool, and a few other ones too. I can't wait to see and hear Trueline Brands, what's going to go on, because I have no doubt with everything that you've done in your past and all the success that you've had, and what you've learned from some really successful people, that it's going to be another big success for you and your investors. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
well, thank you so much. This was really, really great. And anytime I can see Rocky Balboa, as a Philly guy, I think I just feel more at home. I
Right.
feel good. So I really appreciate this, Michael. I appreciate you giving me a forum to talk about my project, and always happy to share. Isaac, obviously, the Tigert family is a legendary Tennessean family, and Memphis and Jackson, even Nashville to a small degree. Obviously,
Right.
we're all part of the Tigert story. So I'm thrilled to even have even be adjacent to that is thrilling for me.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show once again.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.